And no, this is not an off limits conversation for a pastor. It's in the Bible. So let's talk about that. 1 Corinthians 7:3-5 says it this way: husbands should fulfill his wife's sexual needs, and the wife should fulfill her husband's needs. The wife gives authority over her body to her husband, and the husband gives authority over his body to the wife. Do not deprive each other of sexual relations unless you both agree to refrain from sexual intimacy for a limited time, so you can give yourselves more completely to prayer. Afterward, you should come together again, so that Satan won't be able to tempt you because of your lack of self-control. So there it is. Let's go back through these verse by verse and really unpack what the Bible is saying about how to have incredible sex. The husband should fulfill his wife's sexual needs, and the wife should fulfill her husband's needs. What is that telling us off the bat? We need to fulfill the spouse's needs. It's there that we should meet them. It's not something that we should look at and go, gosh, one of those things that I don't want to do, or I'm depriving them of. This is something that we are called into, to meet those sexual needs. What are they? Like, one of the questions we should ask because of this verse is, hey, sweetheart, what are your needs? What are your desires? Like, what are your fantasies? What would make you feel like I could meet some needs in your sexual life? That's an actual conversation that we should have because of this verse, as we are called to meet the needs of our spouse. What are they? Let's talk about them. Let's open up that dialogue and figure out what you want. Like, let's start with that. Then he goes on to say the wife gives authority. So we've talked about our needs. The wife then gives authority over her body to her husband, and the husband gives authority over his body to the wife. This is a crazy picture. What this actually means is, if you're in marriage, if you've signed the covenant, you're sealed, you become one, your body no longer belongs to you. It's no longer your body. It actually belongs to your spouse. And therefore, they get to say what you do with it. It is ultimately their opinion and their decision that matters most when it comes to your body. And so my wife gets to tell me what to do with my body. It's no longer mine. It belongs to her. So how does she want it to look? How does she want it to smell? What does she want to do with it? Like, I get to offer my body to her, and she ultimately gets to pick when, where, and how she wants to use it. That's what this Bible verse is telling us. And so this picture is actually, let's just flesh this out practically. What would that look like in real time? Well, one of the things that my wife and I do is that, like, for example, if my body belongs to her now, then she gets to pick out, again, what she wants it to look like. Like, what's the shape of my body she desires most? What about my body is most attractive? What can I emphasize about in my working out and my cardio and my nutrition that would amplify what she wants to see? Because my body is no longer mine, it's hers. Okay. And so what about how it smells? Like, my body has a scent to it. And so no longer do I, if my authority has now been given to her, do I get to pick out what it smells like? I'm not talking about, after workout and I get to choose the kind of scent my sweat gives off, but I'm talking about cologne. She gets to pick out the cologne that she likes on my body because my body is hers. So I don't pick out my cologne anymore. Like, she picks it out because she goes to figure out a scent that she likes, that she wants it to smell like on my body. And I wear that because my job is to use my body to please her and submit joyfully to her authority. And then, of course, how this could apply practically as it comes to sex is my body. What does she want from my body? Again, asking her, what and how and when do you want to use my body? And you get to decide, like, what do you want my body to do? And then joyfully submitting to her. Now, this really plays into, like, some dynamics around, like, timing with sex and how long we refrain from it, and when people aren't in the mood, because if you're not in the mood for a long time, it can become problematic. And ultimately, if your body's no longer yours and you're not in the mood, but they are, and they have authority over your body, then what we should do is joyfully submit to their authority even when we're not in the mood. That's one of those ways that plays out, is that it doesn't really matter if you're in the mood or not. Now, I know you may be thinking, yeah, but let's just push that to its logical conclusion. What if they want to frog it out every 5 minutes? And I don't think that's a good question. I think that's not the point of the text. I think the point of the text is to say that we shouldn't deprive our spouses of what's rightfully theirs, meaning my body. And so don't do that. Don't deprive one another of sex. And this picture of authority being joyfully in submission to the other actually creates a picture of how we joyfully submit to the Lord. We are in submission to him and his authority, and we are to give ourselves over to him in full surrender, even when we don't feel like it or don't understand. And so it models a picture of our relationship with Jesus. And it also counterintuitively rebukes the world's ideas of sex, how sex is all about you and you do what you want, you get what you want, your body is yours. And it's a counterintuitive principle to say it's actually theirs, and I'm going to give it over to what they want, how they want, and when they want it. And that actually creates an intimacy, a sexual intimacy that will far surpass any other version out there today. That typically those broken versions of sex lead to destruction or deprivation. And you don't want destructive lust happening. You don't want deprivation happening, because it will eventually lead to destructive lust. As the next verse will go on to say, do not deprive each other of sexual relations, unless you both agree to refrain from sexual intimacy for a limited time, so that you can give yourselves more completely to prayer. So again, I think Paul's point, the Bible's making a point here, do not deprive each other. Like you can't do that as a married couple, mood or not. Like enjoy joyfully submitting to the authority of your spouse in a way that will please them despite the mood you're in, and allow that obedience to the Lord produce in you a joyful experience with your spouse. Now, if you do refrain, and sometimes this is a good thing to do, from sex for a season, and get into the intimacy with the Lord in that space, that can be a beautiful thing for a marriage. And so, hey, maybe you're in a season where like the sexual relationship isn't going well, or even just like there's a lot of tension in the relationship. A good exercise is actually to fast sex for a short time, and both equally devote yourselves to prayer, and allow that time of prayer to increase your intimacy with the Lord. And then it will spill over to intimacy in your relationship. And as you come back together, the sex will be much, much better. It just will. It's just a fact that if you do that and you return to it, it will be that much better and spiritually enriched, which is the best sex that there is. And so now, if you do refrain for a season, or let's say that you even are refraining not for fasting, but you're refraining because you've got distance with each other, or maybe you just had a baby and there's like there's that hormone season where you're literally not ready, and your physical body is not ready, or whatever reason you've been refraining for any kind of a season. Don't sit there forever, because you should come back together again, so that Satan won't be able to tempt you because of your lack of self-control. And so if there's a refraining, what can happen is that we have natural impulses and desires in us that if they're not fulfilled, right, the hormones will increase in our bodies. If they're not fulfilled, then we're going to have an urge in us, and Satan knows that. And Satan will move towards us in that urge and provoke and tempt us to go down a lustful path. And so be really mindful of your marriage, and make sure that you're not depriving someone and therefore giving them over to lustful temptations that Satan is going to pour into them and pour onto them, because he knows that spiritual battle is there. And so one thing we should do is be warring together in marriage to say, hey, how can I help you follow Jesus? Right. And sometimes that question is, well, let's have some spiritual and sexual intimacy so that the two of us can walk purely and resist temptations that could come if we don't do this. Because it says there's a lack of self-control. And I think that's in all of us. Like we all know, I think we can all admit, like none of us are perfectly in control of our sexual impulses and lusts and desires and thoughts. Like we're just not. And so honor that about your spouse, that they would be undergoing temptation if you deprive them of what's rightfully theirs, namely your body. So what can we pull from this? How can we take away a few things about who God is, who we are, what the gospel is, and what our mission is as a church? A couple bullet points. First, let's just say this is implied, not directly spoken over, but implied that God designed sex. God designed marriage, and God designed sex for marriage. This is a good design. It's a beautiful design. And when we don't operate in this design, things happen. Let's just consider the amount of sexually transmitted diseases that are spread this way. The amount of kids that are born without fathers this way. The amount of abortions that happen this way. We could go down the list, but this is why God has reasons for the things he says. He ultimately puts boundaries in our life for life-giving reasons. Not to take life from us, but to give life to us. We just have to trust and obey what he says is a good idea. What we can take about this from ourselves, right? We shouldn't deprive each other. We should meet needs for each other. We should be actively meeting needs, talking about what those needs are, discussing what they are, and then actively meeting them, not depriving another person of those needs. And we should submit the authority of our bodies to another. And we should help each other avoid temptation. Like maybe you should have this conversation. Maybe you've had lust in your background in a really profound way. Maybe there's been pornography addiction. Maybe there's been adultery. And like this is a sensitive subject, right? I think it's a subject that even though it's sensitive, that you should still be talking about. Like you should still put on the table often. Sex is too big of a part of a relationship, a part of a marriage, to not talk about it, to not talk about what's going on underneath. And so like help your spouse navigate lustful temptations. You know, one of the things my wife will do is if there's like something on the screen or something, a woman over, we're at the pool, a woman's in like one of those little string things, you know, it's not even a bathing suit. It's just like a string. And she's like, hey, guard your eyes. Hey, don't look over there. Hey, watch out. You know, she's like, mindful of the fact that I'm a man who does have impulses, and she'll help navigate that with me instead of always being a tension that we're fighting up against. Like, did you do that? Oh my gosh, you know, and having that whole conversation of jealousy and insecurity. Let's be secure in Jesus and who we are in him, and also accept that we all have human tendencies. And in marriage, let's help each other navigate those and work them out well so that we fight against Satan and not against each other. The gospel in this passage can be, though we have fallen in or fall into sexual sin, all of us, Jesus said it's not even your actions that count as sexual sin, it's your heart. If in your heart you've lusted after another person, you've already committed sexual sin. So all of us have fallen into sexual sin. And if you say you haven't ever done that, you're a liar. God sent Christ to live in total purity so that by trusting in him, in Christ, we can bring that purity into our sexual lives. You think, well, I don't have this strength to be this pure. I don't have the strength to submit my body over to my spouse. I don't have the strength to not deprive them and be in the mood. And well, neither do I, neither does my wife. We don't have the strength in us to walk out the biblical model for sex, but he gives us the strength. He gives us the purity. He gives us the desires. And as we lean into what he calls us into in marriage and having incredible sex in marriage, it becomes the best version. And you see that it is the best version out there. It is the by far best way to have incredible sex, is doing it God's way by submitting your body over to your spouse in every single way. So here's our mission as a church. What can we do with this this crazy passage. Well, here's what I would say, honestly, as I've said many times. If you're married, submit your body to the authority of your spouse. And if you're not married, refrain from using your body for sexual pleasures and give yourself to prayer until the time is right. That's what I would say. So how can I, if I'm married, go, babe, my body's yours. How can I shape it? How can I scent it? What can I do? What can I eat? How can I use it? What can we do in the bedroom that would make my body yours? And let me submit joyfully to your authority. And so that would be my encouragement for you today. The number one way to have incredible sex would be to joyfully submit your body and the authority over your body to your spouse. And if you're not married, I would say fast sex, fast it out of your life, and use that season of life to really get with the Lord in prayer, develop intimacy with him. So when the time is right and you do join together in marriage, that intimacy would flow over and spill over into a sexual intimacy in your marriage when the time is right.